welcome back to Durian ASEAN. You're with me, Gowri, and we're on to our ASEAN Breakfast Call session. And today we will be discussing about the 10-year Philippines and U.S. Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which is the EDCA, and also touch a little bit on the China-Vietnam territorial dispute. And with me today, I have Mano Maniam, who is an actor, director, theater lecturer, facilitator at local universities and academies. So how are you doing today, Mano?
Okay. Thank you. Feeling okay, trying to get out of a cold.
Oh, right. Okay. I hope you recover soon.
I hope so, too. It's been there for a while.
So have you had your breakfast?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Just had it.
So let's get on with our discussion for today. What's actually going on with this Philippines-U.S. treaty, and with China trying to expand its territory into the Paracel Islands and all? Like, what's going on?
What's going on is actually in this piece of the sea, the South China Sea, and which is actually the western fringe of this largest pool of water we have on Earth called the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. And this particular area, the South China Sea, which hugs the coast of China, all the way right down to Malaysia, right down to the equator, has been the sea route, and the trade routes for millennia. People from India, not only Southeast Asia, but India and the Middle East, and later on the West, all had to travel that piece of water in order to reach this mythical, fabulous place called Cathay, which is today modern China. And of course Japan and also Korea, Taiwan, all this in this region in northeast of Asia. And so this link, which is very, very strategic, everybody wants to control it. And with China rising into becoming a world power and all, they feel that they have more rights to that piece of water, which also adjoins countries like Vietnam and, of course, the Philippines and Taiwan, and Japan is involved too. So is South Korea involved too. So all these countries say that, wait a minute, we need to really think about this very carefully. And there are a number of islands over there, and everybody seems to have a claim to it for historical purposes, even from tiny Brunei. You can just imagine tiny Brunei on one hand, interested in some part of the Spratly Islands, and another one group. And another group of islands called the Paracel, which is closer to Vietnam, and Vietnam is specifically saying that part of it is ours. Okay. And right now, as we know, the China has taken a drilling rig to go and explore for oil at the Paracel Islands, and of course Vietnam didn't like it, and they sent their ships over there, and they went around playing dodgem cars in the seas, knocking into each other. And the latest report in yesterday's papers has been that China used water cannon, like we do in our street demonstrations.
We can relate to it,
against the Vietnamese boats, and all this become very dramatic, and everybody is getting their feathers up and their backs up on this.
So, do you think that this treaty or the pact that Philippines signed with U.S. had a lot to do with what China is doing right now?
On the face of it, it does, actually. The Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which is a 10-year, 10-page document with a preamble and 12 articles, which was signed just 3 hours before President Obama visited the Philippines for a day and then went off just very recently. And then suddenly everybody got sort of like surprised. How come so fast? What's this all about? And even the Philippines Senate is now questioning how come we didn't have a chance to talk about it before it was done. And so that's something going on within the Philippines. And then China, of course, is saying, hey, you can't do this, because this is our territory and all. Then the U.S. is saying, wait a minute, we have been interested in the Pacific Ocean for a long time. And in 1999, they said that the South China Sea is actually the western fringe of the Pacific Ocean, and therefore we have legitimate rights. And they have always been interested in this part of the world because they were the colonial power over the Philippines until after the Second World War.
That's right.
So they feel that they too have an interest, and they have a defense thing with, of course, with Japan and South Korea, and of course with the Philippines. So they feel that their rights and their need for their military to be around here to make sure that everything is in balance, mainly to keep the trade routes open. That's the number one thing. Lots of trade going on in this part of the world. And if you were to take India, China, and Southeast Asia, you're talking about more than 50% of the population of the earth is right here. And those sea lanes are very important.
Okay. So this EDCA, do you think it is intimidating China?
Of course they will see it as an intimidation because it gives America the right to come and position its military in the Subic Bay area, the part which they had developed and kept. And in 1992 they left, I think, because 1991 Philippines said no more U.S. bases and so forth. And then they wanted to transform the Subic Bay into the latest Philippine military sophistication, the modernization of their ships and so on and so forth, and become a big center. It didn't quite take off the way they wanted, and therefore it has been an open point. And given the kind of exigencies and the things which are going on in this part of the world, I think they felt that it's time to come back and renew their stay on a temporary basis, as I say, for 10 years, and having the right to go to wherever the Philippines says that you can go in and park your stuff over there. Other parts of the country, other bases within the Philippines. And this is a very contentious issue at the moment, but there are safeguards within the 12 articles in EDCA that will prevent any large-scale recolonization of the Philippines, which some people are fearful of.
How do you think the neighboring countries are reacting to it? Should we start feeling fearful that U.S. is setting up their military base here? Should we start stepping up our military, our defenses as well?
I think this will be a number one question with a lot of people, especially right now with the ASEAN summit going on in Myanmar, which just opened a few hours ago yesterday on Sunday. And I think they will be talking about that. In fact, the foreign ministers of ASEAN had actually come out to say that, we should all go back to something which we all agreed called the Declaration on the Code of Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, which was signed with China in 2002, believe it or not. That's 12 years ago. And they said we should go there, and where we said, if there's any problem, we should all sit and talk about it rather than, raise a lot of controversy and then go towards some kind of a collision course. And so that they are taking, these foreign ministers of ASEAN are taking serious concerns over this fresh tensions which have just come about in the last, so many days, so many weeks. So, yes, we will have to see what's going on in ASEAN in the next few days to find out how the various countries, the 11 countries, are reacting, either individually or collectively, about the new agreement.
So do you think that this is going to start giving way to the entry of maybe nuclear weapons, other chemical, biological weapons?
Well, I don't think so, because Article 4 of this agreement very, very specifically bans any kind of entry of nuclear weapons or anything to be positioned in any of the bases.
Okay.
So,
what about the Mutual Defense Treaty? How does EDCA relate to the Mutual Defense Treaty?
Well, right at the very preamble of this agreement, it is said that it is an extension of this Mutual Defense Treaty, which was signed way back in 1951, quite soon after the Philippines became independent. One of the first things they did was to deal with the security issue. And of course, emergent countries after colonialism didn't have their own military and so on. They always, like us in Malaysia, we needed some kind of relationship with other more stable countries or bigger countries, like in our case, our ANZAC relationship. And the Philippines then went in 1951, established the the Mutual Defense Treaty, or the MDT. And, in fact, in the preamble of this new agreement which has been signed, it states that this is the deepening of the relationship based on the MDT to resist attack from the outside. And it's supposed to raise the scope of the MDT and to settle disputes peacefully and within the preamble of the United Nations provisions. But the thing is, all this nice talk and all that still creates a little bit of sensitivity to China, which states that nothing can take place in this area without our consent. In fact, what they are now claiming in the South China Sea is 90% of the territorial area of the South China Sea, leaving behind only about 10% to all the other littoral countries. So that is causing the kind of concern. So both sides are concerned about the other, and both sides are acting to make the other side feel more nervous. And that's what is happening, and that's what's being discussed, I think, or will be discussed in Myanmar.
So do you think that China, the purpose of doing this is to assert their superpower, or is it more economic?
It's a chess game, really.
Okay.
You know, this part of the world, or most parts of the world which have been sensitive, it's always a chess game going on. You move one piece, the other side moves another piece, and then it goes on that way. And as long as they play chess, the game is going on, that's fine. But we just don't want direct collision, especially when, when you're talking about nuclear capacities, and we're talking about people coming from various types of political systems, where one side will say that ours is better than yours, and then you'll have differences. When differences emerge, then it becomes the cleavage where it can become bigger and bigger until communication becomes more difficult, which is exactly the very basis why we created, evolved ASEAN, so that if we have problems, let's talk it over.
Okay.
So, on one hand, we have, in the 21st century at least, gone into negotiations, discussions, and support and group therapy, so to speak, rather than have one-on-one. China wants a one-on-one issue with each of the countries which it has a dispute with, while the rest, especially the U.S., want to have an international negotiation or a kind of a treaty which will involve everybody to have a say about the same matter.
Okay.
That's a fundamental difference between the China position and the rest of the ASEAN and America position.
Okay. So besides protection from the United States, I should say, what other benefits do you think Philippines will be deriving from the EDCA?
Besides the feeling of, well, our big brother is back here, and we feel comfort with that. And besides that feeling, I think the amount of intercourse across the Pacific, from the Eastern Pacific and the Western Pacific, I mean, the United States on one hand, on that side, and the Philippines on this side, a lot of trade. It'll be an enhancement what has been historically going on between these two nations.
Okay.
So I think that the economy will flourish, and societies and whatever hostility or suspicions or misgivings people may have of each other will be ironed out. And I know and I suspect that there is always and will always be a strong element within the Philippines to have the Americans on their side, whether in education or in culture or in economics, military, and so on. Whatever relationship they have, they want to have it close.
So do you think that after 10 years, U.S. would want to continue parking their military base in the Philippines?
I don't know. I mean, we should just look at see that page as time goes on. 10 years can be a very long time. Things are happening in a space of few days, few weeks. And so we don't know. But it states that after 10 years, any one of the two, the Philippines or the United States, can say, okay, we'll stop. But if they don't say, okay, we'll stop, it can go into the 11th and 12th and 13th and 14th year. And this is also causing a little bit of worry to others, especially to China, and especially to those opponents of renewed relationship within the Philippines itself.
So why do you think that Philippines did not maybe call for a dialogue or something? Why did they have to get the United States involved in this instead of trying to talk things over with the Asian countries?
I think it is more than just the Philippines just putting up a red flag and say, "Come help us." I think it is a collective thing. If you know that, if you notice, the whole of this South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, Japan, they all form a line all the way from the north and goes all the way right down south across the equator to Australia and New Zealand. So it is actually one unbroken line which has been there in place since the Second World War. So it is not something which the Philippines has invented because they have some problems with China.
Okay.
And just very recently, Philippines arrested 11 people from a Chinese boat for taking some turtles or something like that. You know, it's so you have a thing as small, minor, like that on one hand, and you also have a relationship which has been going on for hundreds of years.
Okay, let's maybe move on to Vietnam now. So they've already been having all these problems about trying to expand their territorial waters into the Philippines area. Why are they doing it to Vietnam as well?
It's a very good question, because the Spratlys, in this case, the Paracel Islands closer to Vietnam, supposed to have oil and gas deposits. The whole thing goes around oil and gas.
So it's both ways, Philippines, oil and gas, Vietnam, oil and gas.
Yes.
Okay.
And for Philippines and Vietnam, I would think that they're emerging economies, and therefore their dependence on energy and power is is going to be higher and higher and higher. Therefore, they need to get those sources. And of course, they will want to go into their own economic zones, you know. And they feel, Vietnam feels that it is their economic zone, and China is saying, no, it is ours. And so they said that we'll show you that it's ours, and they put in that rig. And that has created the tensions at the moment. But we must also remember that Vietnam and China have been at each other for quite a long time. And
Vietnam and China.
Vietnam and China.
Okay.
And in the historical knockout, you know, if you look at it as a boxing match, Vietnam has won the early rounds.
Okay. Do you think U.S. is going to intervene in this as well?
That's everybody's question. Of course, nobody will say they will or they won't. But the fact is, if they park their bus there, they are saying, well, don't come too close.
All right.
And so that's where they are. And they are like policemen, like saying that we are here, make sure that, you know, everything is going on according to business as usual.
Okay. So, according to the news I read this morning, I think, the Vietnam government actually hasn't responded to it. It's only the people of Vietnam who are demonstrating in front of the Chinese embassy. But the government are actually keeping quiet, and some of the policemen even arrested some of the protesters when they were actually protesting peacefully. So, do you think there's something fishy going on here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, every government has to protect foreign embassies' location, because it's considered the foreign embassies. Foreign embassies are on their own soil, so to speak, and therefore, if you protest against or whatever, or threaten or throw things, then it can become ugly, and so an arrest is more like a deterrent, I think. I don't think that is anything unusual.
Okay. But why is it that they haven't started a dialogue or anything with China?
I think there must be some dialogue going on, but which are quite maybe covert and not up there in the international press, for the international press to comment on. But I would think that with this ASEAN thing coming up, the last few months, people would have wanted for a collective response to this rather than an individual response. That's what ASEAN wants, a collective response and a negotiation on a multilateral basis rather than on a bilateral basis.
Okay. So with these protesters, so they're arrested and all, doesn't that show that, I don't know, maybe they are a lot more concerned about this issue than the government? Or is the government actually working on something, but they just don't want people to know about it, like what you said?
It's probably that way. I don't think the government is blind or insensitive. But I think it has its own way of operation. In international relations, there are so many ways of skinning the cat, so to speak.
All right.
So they're having their own diplomatic channels going on. And while the man in the street feels empowered to have his say too. Okay.
Because China, apart from setting up the oil rig and everything, they also have that oil rig actually protected by gunmen, their military and all.
It's based on their belief that it is their right.
Okay.
That comes down to the question of who has the right. But they don't want to go in for an arbitration. That's the thing. They want to do a direct negotiation with each individual country involved. And this is a very, very fundamental difference between the parties involved. They can't even disagree on how to solve this problem.
Okay.
That's where we are. It's an impasse. And it's in that impasse that the Americans are coming in to say, okay, I'm throwing my hat into the ring, so to speak.
Do you think the U.S. is looking at Asia right now and thinking, like, you guys can't even solve your own problems and we have to come over and help you and protect you, and the kind of all the way back to the white man's burden thing?
No. I don't think so. I think it's America has got two forces going on almost all the time. One force is, since they have the right and the might, and being the only superpower around, that they feel that they have the right and the need to do this kind of protection on a global scale. So wherever there is a problem, be it in Libya, be it in wherever, the Middle East, they feel that they have to intervene in some way or another. Just our the Secretary John Kerry, he's all the time traveling all over the world, trying to seek some kind of solution to the kind of problems going on. Okay, so that's one force. The second force is that people are saying they're tired of being the policeman. Why should America spend all its money and its people and so on and so forth when there are more important, urgent domestic issues going on? So there are two opposing forces there. I don't think America feels that, oh, why are you calling me to come over here again? I've got other business to take care of. Remember, this line which came up after the Second World War from South Korea all the way right down to New Zealand, which is what we call the Western Pacific Defense Line, that will have to be protected, and they don't want any hole in that line.
Okay.
And so they feel it is their need to come in over here. And some of the things will have to go back into the Second World War and the experiences. Remember, America was drawn into the war through Hawaii. So therefore, they feel that they have to look after this large pond.
Could you just tell me a little bit more about the Western Pacific Defense Line?
Well, it's actually it's out there for anyone to go and find out about this.
Okay.
But after the Second World War and the post-Second World War, there was this emergence of communism, which was coming all the way eastwards. And Mao Zedong symbolized that, Ho Chi Minh symbolized that, the whole of Indochina became communist, and then the Vietnam War was over that issue. And almost every country in Southeast Asia had to deal with that problem too, from Burma, Malaya, at the time, Philippines, Indonesia, everybody had to deal with that one way or another. And therefore America felt that they had to reinforce their strength and stop that domino effect of, one after another, the countries all falling red, the red tide, so to speak. So it goes back to that time when there was this need to intervene and to show your flag, so to speak.
Okay. Could it be that the reason United States is intervening in all this could also be that they are also interested in the oil and gas in these two countries, and they are trying to get ahead of China? Or
they want to have everybody in place so that the business as usual can go on.
Okay.
I would think, because any kind of change will create changes all over. And the biggest change which is happening right now all over the world is the emergence of China as a power.
Okay.
And soon as a nuclear power. I mean, a superpower to compete with the U.S. And then they will want to, like any powerful person or country, will want to say, this is my territory, and now that I can do this, or I need that, therefore I need more, and I extend my boundaries over there.
Okay.
And so everybody wants to play this check and balance thing, and so it's happening in this part of the world right now.
Do you know about how Malaysia particularly is reacting to this? Like, do we feel safe that the U.S. is coming back to Asia?
We have been quite neutral about this.
Okay.
And, we have been traditionally been the underbelly of China. And for more than 2,000 years, that intercourse in this with Southeast Asia and China on one hand and India on the other side, this has been going on for ages. Right. We are right in the middle of it. Not only the fact that we have Indians and Chinese who make up Malaysia,
right.
But we are caught right in between, and therefore we wouldn't want to do anything to offend China and disturb that big red dragon. But at the same time, we also know that we have to keep everything in place so that we can go on and develop ourselves, and the economic relations on which ASEAN so wants to develop, can go on without being too disturbed. And prosperity and the sharing of that prosperity among ASEAN has been the number one thing which they're committed to.
All right.
So while we would welcome the U.S., we don't want to see it as increasing tension. We want to see it as, okay, let's talk.
Okay. So I think my final question would be, with the U.S. having military bases in Philippines now, and now that they signed the pact, one of the requirements was that if any one of them is attacked, the other one is obliged to help. So in the case that China makes a move on the Philippines and the U.S. has to intervene, do you see a potential war happening in Southeast Asia?
The potential for war always exists all over the world, really. I mean, like what's going on in Ukraine and places like that. We'll show you that, yesterday it looked calm and peaceful, but, who knows what's tomorrow or what tomorrow will bring. But the U.S. has just reconfirmed that it will protect Japan, the Philippines, and its other allies in disputes with China. It has made that very, very categorically strong. And China's response is it will use military force to safeguard its own territory and, quote unquote, will make no compromise, no concession on trading, not even a little bit of violation will they tolerate, they say. So they have drawn the lines on the sea, on the water itself. But at the same time, U.S. wants to keep the relationship and build the relationship with China so that they will have some kind of mutuality in terms of respect, and they need each other a lot, especially the U.S. wants China's help in dealing with North Korea and also in the area of cybersecurity. And they both say that, the mutual interests outweigh the differences. And China actually has been known to say that the Pacific is huge enough to hold both China and the U.S. But Obama, when he was signing this agreement, he said that, this is nothing more than just a 21st century update on decades of alliance to build the capacity in the Philippines, to train them in maritime security and disaster relief. It is actually a test case of U.S. ability to rebalance its forces in Southeast Asia, starting with the 1951 MDT.
Okay.
And to forge this alliance. So they see it as a natural extension of something which started off in the 19th century.
Okay. I like what you said about how their mutual differences actually outweigh their differences.
Yes.
So I guess they won't be trying anything dangerous around here then. Okay.
I don't think so. I think we all in Malaysia especially can go to sleep well.
Okay, that's comforting.
But because these problems have been there, the Spratlys have been there. They've been talking about the Spratlys and the Paracel Islands all the time. But it's every now and again somebody gets a little antsy and wants to do something about it, especially when the other person is distracted by something else.
Okay.
And then they'll say, "Hey, wait a minute," and they turn around and say, "No, let's talk about this," or no, we won't talk about that. And a little bit of excitement going on in the South China Sea these days. But that's nothing new in the last 2,000 years of maritime history in this part of the world.
Okay, so we really have nothing to worry about.
Not to say nothing to worry about. We need to be concerned, yes, but I don't think we need to sort of like put up all our shutters and say,
war is coming.
The conventional war situation, I think we need to have large brains and people, think tanks, people who have dedicated their whole everything to looking into the crystal ball to see what's happening where. Even then, people are fooled. We'll never know when the next flashpoint is. Nobody predicted Syria.
Yeah.
Nobody predicted Crimea. And so things which we don't think about sometimes becomes the real sensitive spot. Sometimes the things which we all talk about and we see a lot of action going on and we see water cannons and stuff like that happening, then they usually are just front ends to, like, we have got a problem here which we need to talk about.
All right. So I think that's all the time that we have for our session today. Thank you very much for joining us. That was actually a pretty exciting session, learning about the EDCA, the Vietnam, China, US, and it's kind of what everyone is really worried about at the moment. So thanks for clarifying the issue.
Thank you very much for having me over.
Okay, so to all our listeners, don't forget to like us on Facebook, Durian ASEAN, and also follow us on Twitter. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning with more ASEAN news for you. So stay tuned. Bye-bye.